Good morning, students. I welcome you all to the English class. Today, we are going to start with a new topic Gulliver's Travel from Supplementary. This story is written by Jonathan Swift. Children, now let's see the characters of the story. Gulliver, K is the main character of this story. Lilliputians, the Lilliputians are men 6 inches in height. Children, now tell short summary of this story. Gulliver, a ship's doctor, took a job on a ship that was going on a long journey. Suddenly, the ship got a catch in a violent storm and was thrown off its course. It hit a rock and broke up completely. Six of the crew members, including a Gulliver, got into a boat, but unfortunately, they were overturned by a big wave. As Gulliver was a good swimmer, he managed to reach a land. He felt hungry and tired, so he fell into a deep sleep. When he woke up, he was unable to move his hands, legs, head, and body. Later, Gulliver understood that they were Lilliputians who were not 6 inches high. When Gulliver tried to free himself, Gulliver asked for food and drink by signaling to them. Gulliver slept again and then he was transported to the capital. There the emperor received him and set him free as they thought that Gulliver was harmless. Gulliver stayed with them by helping them in many ways. The neighboring kingdom of Blefuscu declared war on Lilliput. The kingdom brought 100 ships to mount an attack. Lilliputians asked Gulliver to do a favor in the war, so Gulliver helped them. Gulliver took a long rope, tied all the 100 ships together, and dragged them in the water. He pulled the ships the whole day. The king of Blefuscu begged for peace between the two kingdoms. The emperor agreed Gulliver was the hero for them. After that, Gulliver lived peacefully in Lilliput for many years. Children, it would be an interesting story. Watch the video and enjoy reading this story.
Okay, my dear students, shall we go to the lesson? Yeah, let's start the lesson. Supplementary Gulliver's Travel. I know, my dear students, you are eagerly waiting to learn a new adventurous stories. Let's start. Gulliver, a ship doctor, took a job on a ship that was going on a long voyage. The voyage started well, but soon things changed dramatically. The main character name is Gulliver. He is a doctor working in a ship. He is going in a long voyage. Long voyage means long journey, long travel, and by sea. The journey started well. After that, they got some problem. The ship got in a violent storm. Storm means the violent strong winds with rains, like tempest. Okay. Then it hit a rock and broke up completely. The ship broke up completely by the rock. Six of the crew members, including Gulliver, got into a small boat and rowed until they were overturned by a big wave which came up suddenly. There are six members in that group, including Gulliver. Got it a small boat. They get a small boat and rowed until they were overturned by a big wave which came up suddenly. Gulliver was a good swimmer and he managed to swim till he reached land. Out of six members, Gulliver was a good swimmer, so he reached the land. The coast appeared strange and lonely. After Gulliver reached the land, he sees everywhere there is nothing, only strange and lonely. Gulliver dragged himself along the shore. He looked for some people or houses. Gulliver is expecting for some people or some houses, but there was no sign of life. There is nothing. Hungry and exhausted, he fell on a patch of grass and he fell into deep sleep. He felt hungry and exhausted. Exhausted means very tired. So he fell down on grass and he fell into the deep sleep. When Gulliver woke up, he was lying on his back and the sun was in his face. When Gulliver woke up, he was lying on the back and he felt the sunrise on his face. When he tried to get up, he found himself unable to sit up or move at all. When he tried to move or get up, he couldn't. He could not to sit or move. Terrified and puzzled, he tried to turn his head. Terrified means extreme fear, and puzzled means confused. He can't try to turn his head. He found his arms and legs were securely tied with the slender strings on each side and attached to pegs fixed on the ground. He realized one thing: his arms and legs were securely tied with slender strings. Slender means very small, thin. Strings means kaya. He was attached to pegs fixed on the ground. Pegs means a small pin or bolt which is used to fix anything strongly. We can use in tent. His hair, which was long and thick, was similarly tied down. Even his hair also tied down. The Gulliver felt something moving along his body up to his chin. To his surprise, he saw a human being not 6 inches high, with a bow and arrow in his hands and Gulliver at his back. Suddenly he got surprised because he saw a human being not 6 inches high is equal to like your mobile size. The human being looked like your mobile size with a bow and arrow in his hands. You know the bow and arrow, I know that. And Gulliver on his back. Gulliver later learned that these creatures were called Lilliputians. Finally, Gulliver learned that these creatures, these small human beings, were called Lilliputians. My dear student, listen carefully. I may ask any question from this, any para or any line. Okay, so keep learning carefully. Okay, Gulliver learned these creatures were called Lilliputians. Startled by this sight, Gulliver cried out and soon managed to free his left arm. Now, Gulliver cried out and soon managed to free his left arm. The frightened Lilliputians fired dozens of tiny arrows into his hand, face, and body until he once again lay down calmly. The Lilliputians is frightened by his crying. So the Lilliputians fired dozens of tiny arrows. Tiny means small arrows. You know the meaning of arrows into his hand, face, and body until he once again lay down calmly. Lilliputians then built a stage to Gulliver's slide that was about 1.5 feet tall. A Lilliputian built a small stage like your book size. In Gulliver's side, that was about 1.5 feet tall, upon which an obviously important person stood and made a 10-minute speech to Gulliver in a language he could not understand. After that, an important person from that group stood and gave a speech, 10-minute speech to Gulliver in a language he could not understand. A very important person from this group giving speech 10 minutes, but Gulliver could not understand their language. By now, Gulliver was really hungry. Now, our Gulliver was really hungry. With gestures, he signaled to the little people that he wanted food and drink. Through the body language, he signaled to the Lilliputians, "Yeah, I feel very hungry. Please provide some food and drink." Gulliver asked them through gestures. Gestures means actions, body languages. The Lilliputian first got Gulliver to promise to behave himself and then promised to get him some food. Before Lilliputian give some food, they get some promise from the Gulliver. They soon brought baskets of meat and several loaves of bread, which he had 3 at a time because they were so tiny. After they got a promise from the Gulliver, they brought baskets of meat and several loaves of bread, which he had three at a time because they were so tiny. Our Gulliver eat that bread and meat in three because they were very tiny, very small pieces of bread and meat. The Lilliputian also brought 2 barrels of drink, which he enjoyed even though the barrels were smaller than a glass. After he got some food, the Lilliputian also gave 2 barrels of drink. So Gulliver enjoyed the drink. The barrels were smaller than glass. The barrels were very smaller, like our tumbler, like our glass. My dear students, so far we have learned the first part of mysterious stories, the wonderful stories Gulliver travel. The Gulliver goes in a ship as a doctor. The ship broken, so he reached a land. He fell asleep, and then he sees a small human beings, the Lilliputians. So after that, our Gulliver give promise to the Lilliputians and then ask some food and drink. So the Lilliputians give some food and drink. After that, he enjoyed that food and drink. Gulliver was tempted as he lay on the ground. He took up 50 of the small creatures in his hand and crushed them. But he did not want to be pricked with arrows again. How Gulliver was stimulated, he lay down on the ground. So he takes up 50 of the small creatures in his hand and crushed them. But Gulliver did not want to pricked with arrows again. It means hurt with arrows again. So he had promised to behave in exchange for good treatment, because Gulliver already promised them do not harm anyone. So he freed them. After he had eaten, Gulliver promptly fell asleep because his string had a sleeping draught in it. After Gulliver eat that, Gulliver going to sleep because there is sleeping medicines in his drink. They then set about transporting Gulliver to the capital. After that, the Lilliputians wanted to transport Gulliver to the capital. They used large platform with 22 wheels pulled by dozens of 4.5-inch horses. And the Lilliputian used the dozens of 4.5-inch horses, very small horses, to transport Gulliver to the capital. They somehow managed to put him on the platform and track Gulliver down the road to the city. The Lilliputian hardly tried to track Gulliver's body to the city. Suddenly, Gulliver woke up when the vehicle stopped. When the vehicle stopped, suddenly Gulliver woke up. 2 or 3 curious young Lilliputians wanted to see how Gulliver looked when asleep. There is some small young Lilliputians wanted to see how Gulliver sleeps. They climbed up into the engine and advancing very softly to his face, put the sharp end of their hop pike into his left nostril. The small Lilliputians put a sharp end of the uh, sticks into his left nostril. Students, if a small stick put into our nostril, what will happen? Suddenly we will sneeze. Yes, this tickled Gulliver's nose like a straw and made him sneeze. Sneeze means a sudden expulsion of air from the nostril. As they started moving again, Gulliver saw that more than 100,000 Lilliputians had come out to see the strange giant. After that, Gulliver saw that more than 100,000 Lilliputians had come out to see him. Here, Lilliputian sees a Gulliver as a strange giant because Lilliputians are so small, so they are seeing Gulliver as a strange giant. It was a carnival atmosphere, and the Lilliputians seemed to be enjoying themselves, much to Gulliver's amusement. It was a carnival atmosphere. Carnival means festival atmosphere. The Lilliputians seem to be enjoying themselves, much to Gulliver's amusement. They are Lilliputians are enjoying. Finally, they arrived at the emperor's palace. Finally, the Lilliputians and Gulliver reached the palace of emperor. The emperor was there to receive Gulliver. Here, emperor received Gulliver. Gulliver was lodged in an old and disused temple. Gulliver was stayed at an old and disused temple. His leg was chained and he would only move about a little bit. His leg was tied with a chain, so he couldn't move, but he can move only little bit. After a few weeks, the Lilliputians and the emperor decided that he meant them no harm. So Gulliver was set free to roam around Lilliput on condition that he would not harm them and would help them in whatever he could. Here, the emperor of that place, Lilliputian's emperor, give permission Gulliver to go everywhere in the island Lilliput, but there is one condition: do not harm any Lilliputians. And then Gulliver must help them whatever he could. Gulliver agreed and was freed. After that, Gulliver accepted that and he was freed. He was provided with food and water. A house was built for him. The Lilliputians gives so many food, water, and they build house for the Gulliver. Gulliver stayed with the Lilliputians, helping them in many ways. Gulliver stayed there and he helps in many ways to the Lilliputians. Once it so happened that the neighboring kingdom of Blefuscu declared war on Lilliput. The neighboring country king wanted to war on Lilliput. The king brought 100 ships to mount an attack. The king of Blefuscu brought 100 ships to attack Lilliputians. The Lilliputians ran to Gulliver for help. So the Lilliputians ran to the Gulliver for help. The emperor said, "Don't let us down now, Gulliver. We need your help." The emperor said to Gulliver, "Please help us. We need your help." So Gulliver walked into the sea. He took a long rope, tied all the 100 ships together, and dragged them into water. After that, Gulliver wanted to help the Lilliputians. So Gulliver walked into the sea. He took a long rope and tied all the 100 ships and dragged them into water. Dragged them means pulled them into water. Gulliver pulled the ships the whole day, going round and round until the army of Blefuscu was giddy and in no position to fight. Finally, Gulliver pulled the ships the whole day, round and round, round. So the army of Blefuscu got giddiness. Giddy means faint. So in no position to fight. They are not ready to fight. The king of Blefuscu came begging for peace between the two kingdoms. The king of Blefuscu came to Lilliputian's emperor and asked, begging, he is begging for peace. Please leave us. There is no fight between us, so we will be peace. So the emperor agreed. Finally, the emperor of Lilliputians agreed that Gulliver was hailed as a hero and lived peacefully in Lilliput for many years. Now, Gulliver looks like a hero to the Lilliputians and he lived peacefully in the island of Lilliput for many years. Okay, my dear students, I hope you enjoy the stories Gulliver Travel because it is a mysterious stories. We can learn some moral too because We should not harm any other creatures in the world. We must help as much as we can. Okay, my dear students, thanks for watching.
Lemuel Gulliver was from Nottingham in England. He studied at Cambridge and then became apprenticed to a surgeon in London. Gulliver used his spare time to learn about navigation and mathematics. He believed that one day he would travel to far-off lands. Gulliver worked for 3 years as a ship's surgeon. He then returned to London, got married, and tried, without success, to work as a medic. Finally, he met Captain William Pritchard, master of the Antelope, and set sail for the South Seas. They left Bristol on the 4th of May, 1699. Far into the South Seas, their ship was overwhelmed by a violent storm. Many of the crew died. On November 5th, the ship was blown onto some rocks and was doomed. Gulliver tried to escape in a lifeboat, but the boat was inundated and sank. Gulliver had the choice to swim or to die. He swam until he was exhausted and his feet dropped. He could feel the sand below, so he knew he was close to land, and he managed to walk to safety. Gulliver had arrived in a land he would come to know as Lilliput. He could see no sign of either houses or inhabitants. Weak from exhaustion, Gulliver lay down and fell into a deep sleep, not waking before it was daylight. When Gulliver awoke, he realized that he had been strongly fastened to the ground. His captors, known as Lilliputians, were human-like creatures no more than a few inches tall. They provided him with food and drink, which was laced with a sleeping potion. He slept all through the following night. While Gulliver slept, his captors placed him onto a carriage and took him to a disused temple near their capital city. The carriage was drawn by hundreds of the local inhabitants. At the disused temple, Gulliver was inspected by the emperor and his senior officers. Thousands of the local inhabitants came to marvel at him. Gulliver was chained to the temple, and the ropes that bound him were cut. Now he could move a little and lie down in the shelter of the old temple. Gulliver entertained the court in many ways and gradually gained the confidence of the emperor. On one occasion, he stood like a colossus while the emperor's armies marched through his legs with drums beating and colors flying. Gulliver was finally granted his liberty and had his chains removed permanently. He was given a daily allowance of meat and drink sufficient to support 1,724 Lilliputians. Every village in the kingdom helped to supply the sustenance that Gulliver needed. The emperor allowed Gulliver to visit the capital city of Mildendo. Gulliver took great care not to damage any of the people or the buildings. The empress herself took time to greet Gulliver at the window of her apartment in the center of the royal palace. The emperor's principal secretary told Gulliver that the empire needed his help. The kingdom of Lilliput faced the threat of an invasion from the neighboring kingdom of Blefuscu. The Blefuscudians had equipped a large fleet of ships, and Lilliput would soon be attacked. Gulliver pledged that he was ready to defend with his life the emperor and his state. To prevent the invasion by the armies of Blefuscu, Gulliver was determined to capture their fleet. He planned to tie together their greatest warships and tow them back to Lilliput. He equipped himself with ropes and set off across the channel to where their fleet was gathered. When they saw him, the Blefuscudians were so frightened that they leapt out of their ships and swam for their lives. The whole fleet was left undefended but for the archers who were on the shore, along with more than 30,000 of their countrymen. The archers discharged several thousand arrows at Gulliver in great volleys, and he was struck many times in the hands and face. In spite of this vicious assault, he managed to fasten together 50 of their finest ships, which he cut from their anchors and took back to Lilliput. Upon arriving at the royal port of Lilliput, Gulliver presented the captured ships to the emperor. When the Blefuscudians saw their finest ships being taken to Lilliput, they were left in a state of grief and despair. The Blefuscudians sued for peace, and the war ended.